welcome once again to Bear Wiseman's Gathering of Geeks. With me, Bear Wiseman. And today I have with me Vincent Lilium of SulfuriS. I assume I'm pronouncing that correctly.
You are, yes.
Wonderful. And I have it on fairly good authority that you are at least a little bit of a geek.
You could say that, yes.
Alright, well, to get started, let's say, what type of a geek would you consider yourself? Are you an all-encompassing geek, or are you a pretty specific geek, or what's your poison in geekdom?
Oh, well, there are some people who are really big on, like, computer programming and stuff like that. That is not I.
We call those nerds, I've been told.
Oh, I
So,
see. Well, the etymology of geek and nerd are quite similar. They come from the same kind of source.
yes. I was told by a previous guest that this comes from The Simpsons, and it was that perhaps it was Millhouse or something that was saying that nerds are good at math and geeks are not. So,
I think it was Dork.
could be.
Yeah. I'm not a nerd. Nerds are good at math. Yeah, it was something like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. I'm not huge on memorizing things, but I come from a neurodivergent background, and generally geeks and nerds are associated with that. There's a strong overlap of those things, and I think the words geek and nerd both kind of stem from that idea of the autistic person who doesn't quite engage, and then might hyper focus on something else that nobody else really gives a hoot about. Can I swear on this?
You can swear. Yes.
Okay.
I always forget to tell people that beforehand. Yes, you can absolutely swear. Yeah, I think, like, you can also ask different people, and, like, are you a geek or a nerd? And they might have their own kind of definition of what each means. So I just let people call themselves whatever they want. I think I used to consider myself a nerd, but maybe nowadays I consider myself more of a geek because after thinking about it, nerd does seem a little mathier to me, and I am absolutely useless at math, so I barely passed high school math.
Yeah, ditto. I'm very strongly like right-brained.
Extremely, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what are some of your favorite geeky things? Actually, scratch that. I have a better question because there's one thing that I always find interesting to talk to with geeks who are also metalheads, because I feel like there's such a similarity of cultures there, in that maybe, like, you didn't like the mainstream stuff, you maybe didn't have so many friends, so you found, like, a home in this kind of outcast space where I think maybe the geeks were maybe a little more, like, isolated, but the metalheads might have found a bit more of a culture that they felt like they fit in with when it came to metal. So were you a geek first or a metalhead first, or did they come in at the same time?
I think uh, depends somewhat on how you define it, because I think uh, I think most kids have some kind of weird fixations that they think about, like dinosaurs or Star Wars or something, a lot. And but then when you get a little bit older and the Disney movie du jour doesn't quite do it for you anymore, and then you have to like move into something else. For me, I think it was around middle school the first people who weren't overtly mean to me all of the time. That was partly my fault because I suck at social interaction. Used to suck even worse. So the first people who were overtly mean to me were all some variation of geek or nerd, and So I found stuff like Warhammer through these people, and we used to play those games and talk about Lord of the Rings and stuff. And some of those guys were like, "Hey, do you know Iron Maiden? Do you know Metallica?" And I'm like, "Is that the horrible heavy music that I've been hearing about? Isn't that just noise for angry, edgy people?" And they're like, "No, no, it's actually really cool." And they lent me the CDs and I recorded them onto cassettes. I just totally told you how old I am.
I mean, my introduction to Iron Maiden was a mixtape from my brother, so I'm with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Once again, I didn't have a computer back then. There was a computer in my house. It was a Power Mac, and
green screen or
no. It was a Power Mac was a sort of it was graphic, so it was like similar to like a Windows 95.
classic.
Yeah, they were like we had a couple of things downloaded there which were like trailers. You used to download movie trailers, and they were on the desktop. And I would just watch the trailers over and over and over again because they were there. There wasn't really anything else to do on the computer. So I didn't know about like LimeWire and Napster like some of the other kids. So what I used to do is I used to just buy CDs and make mixed cassettes with from the songs on the CDs. And I used to be very, very proud of my CD collection.
As is only right, really.
Yeah. Oh, there's a meme I really love, which is well, basically boils down to what gives you a feeling of power, and the biggest one is I have that on vinyl.
Yeah, having old Zeppelin albums was definitely a brag back in the day.
I have a couple of my collection doesn't have anything super valuable in it, but there are a couple of things I'm really, really proud of. Like I have a couple of signed Maiden albums and stuff. Oh, my favorite ones are actually I've got Running Free and Twilight Zone, the singles,
Nice.
signed by Paul Di'Anno.
Damn.
Yeah, I am very happy with those.
Gosh, one of my friends had the coolest brag for a while regarding Iron Maiden, and it was because he's a British guy and he used to work at the BBC. He had the original, I don't know if it was the original art, but it was the gold record from Virtual 11 that, like, got left behind at BBC, and they were clearing out a back room one day, and there might have been two of them, but I think he said that when he moved back to the UK, they were in a storage unit in Finland somewhere, and I think he's lost them. So if someone out there has a storage unit who has found there's something very valuable hidden in a storage unit somewhere in Finland.
Oh, jeez. It's probably like right next to the Ark of the Covenant.
Probably, yeah. But like a truly incredible find and a devastating loss at the same time, I would say.
Yep. That's history repeating itself. Perhaps it's destined to re-emerge into some future Maiden Geeks.
It's a wanderer.
And, yeah.
It will come and go from many walls throughout its lifetime.
Oh, that's beautiful.
The legendary Virtual 11 golden record.
Yeah, the prodigal son of the Maiden albums.
I mean, of all the Maiden albums, that's maybe not the best one that you're super excited to have, but just having one of those is still really fucking cool. So
I've noticed when back in the day I used to be in the old Iron Maiden bulletin board, and I used to frequent the super fans. What were they called back in the day? I think group. But anyway, Stephen Baker, he used to be in that too. Yeah, and I noticed there that quite often it's the collectors want the less good albums because they're the ones that didn't sell that well, so they're a little bit harder to find.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because you can get a Power Slave anywhere.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. I've got some of my kids' albums are actually like misprints and stuff, but that used to happen a whole lot.
I've heard from the Finnish scene that one of the really rare finds is the digipack of Sonata Arctica's Reckoning Night. I've promised my friend if I ever come across that somewhere, I'll have to get it for her because apparently it's really hard to come by.
Oh.
Maybe I should go for like a Tori hunt one of these days and see if I can find it.
Yeah, somebody just has that sitting on their shelf and
doesn't think anything of it.
Has absolutely no idea. I probably have a bunch of stuff like that. Like, I've been active in the metal scene since the early 2000s, and I bet I have a bunch of like very limited releases from now bigger bands.
I think I've mostly given away my CD collection, which is kind of a shame in a sense because there was some really good stuff in there, but most of it was back in Canada, of course. So I didn't necessarily feel like, there's streaming services nowadays. I don't want to feel like haul all these CDs over to Finland just to take up space. So I've given most of them to my friends or whatnot, and I'm kind of like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. There's probably some good stuff in there. Damn.
Yeah. I feel like I'm coming across as a huge collector here, but I don't really buy CDs that much anymore or LPs. I get like we have this tradition with my mom that we go to Music Hunter. Shout out Music Hunter in Helsinki. Great place to get like used vinyl and like rare geek paraphernalia and stuff.
Damn, I don't think I've ever been there.
Oh, it's right next to Kaisaniemen, boys.
Well, crap. Oh, I think I know the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've walked past it like 20 times, but never actually gone inside.
Yeah. Well, me and my mom usually go there before Christmas and pick out my Christmas present. We usually pick out like 2 records.
Nice. Your mom's kind of a music geek too, isn't she?
Oh yes, definitely. I inherited my love of David Bowie and Alice Cooper and stuff very young.
Excellent. Shout out to your mom.
Shout out to Mama Vincent.
I haven't done shout outs in a while. This feels good.
Yeah. Hashtag shout outs. Hashtag feels good.
And now you know for sure that we're a bunch of geeks.
Oh, yes, definitely. And a little old.
Yeah.
I don't think the kids do hashtag this and that.
Yeah,
anymore.
I don't think that hashtags, man, that actually does make me feel kind of old to think that hashtags are old now. Like, man, I remember when computers were a new thing.
Yeah.
Remember the old fax machine dial-up tone?
Yeah.
The internet dial-up tone?
Oh.
What a nightmare.
I have my bag over there, and just the other day, I was like riding my bicycle back home from work, and there's a little sort of Angry Birds figure, that plushie that's hanging off it, and it's one of those piggies that's a stormtrooper.
Oh.
and I came across some kids and stuff, and one of the kids kind of looked at me funny, and for some reason I thought that they saw the dangling thing hanging there, and I'm like, oh yeah, they must be Angry Birds kids. And then I'm like, wait a minute, they're probably not Angry Birds kids. When did this come out again? Oh my god, they weren't alive when the Star Wars Angry Birds crossover happened.
I'm trying to think. Angry Birds was like popular when I moved to Finland, and that was 15 years ago now. So
Yeah.
Damn. I wonder if the Angry Birds activity park still exists in, where is it, Vuokatti? Because that was a thing for a while, but I wonder if that's gotten too old, or if things take a little longer to get up north, so maybe Angry Birds is still really popular there.
I don't know. Iso Omena still has the Dudes on Park thing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so...
I remember them still being popular when I moved here for a few years, but I haven't heard from them in 10 years or something.
They've branched out into like just being general media personas nowadays. This is no offense to the Dudesons if you guys are watching. I used to watch Extreme Dudes on it when it came out, and it was just way better than Jackass ever was.
It's true.
Yeah.
Finland does tend to do things better a lot of the time.
Yeah. There used to be a gag that I think it was in the Dudesons movie, the first Dudesons movie, that one of the guys from Jackass said that if they ever retire, they want the Dudesons to take their place. But then they just kind of never retired.
Yeah, gosh, whatever happened to them? This is starting to make me feel really old now.
Yeah.
Jackass, man, that was from before I moved to Finland.
Uh.
Remember the Trailer Park Boys?
Oh, let's go even older. Let's go Daria.
Oh no. Beavis and Butthead. I think I saw the Do America movie once back in the day.
Ah, the Do America movie, so good.
I'm gonna get burnt at the stake for this because I haven't actually ever seen any of the Wayne's World movies.
Oh my.
Which feels kind of sacrilegious as someone who's been in the metal scene for how many years at this point.
Yeah. It's quoted a lot.
I've also heard that that's like basically like the only genuinely really good Mike Myers movie. Which is kind of a burn to Mike Myers. Sorry, Mike Myers, but Austin Powers, I think, didn't really hold up after the 90s.
It does in a little bit of a way because of the 60s sort of aesthetic. So
I think the first one's probably at least good for a chuckle again, but I think the third one I watched and I was just like, what? No, never again. What a load of garbage.
Oh. This is one of those things where I noticed how out of the loop I am on like regular popular culture is I remember Beyonce Knowles. I remember Destiny's Child. Destiny's Child was a thing when I was
Beyonce wasn't always a solo artist.
Yeah, exactly. And then she came out with she showed up in a couple of movies, like the third Austin Powers movie, and then she had that solo career. She had Crazy in Love and stuff, and that played on MTV every 20 minutes. One time I clocked it literally every 20 minutes, and I was just like, oh, this is just getting annoying now, and like. God bless her, but this solo thing is not going to work out. They're going to come back together with Destiny's Child at some point. And then I swear I didn't even hear the name Beyonce Knowles until like Lemonade. And I'm like, it's 2016, and I'm like, wait, Beyonce Knowles? She's still famous? And everybody's like, Beyonce, the Queen Bee. And I'm like, Beyonce Knowles. No one says Knowles anymore.
Oh my goodness. I never understand why they are they actively like rebranding themselves? Because there was Puff Daddy. Isn't he like P. Diddy now, or did he go back to Puff Daddy? Is he even still relevant? I don't know, but
he's relevant for all the wrong reasons.
Not uncommon, I think. Looking at you, R. Kelly and Kanye West.
Oh, jeez.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
But I often have this theory that the longer people stay like extremely famous, the more insane they become. And I also have a theory as to why. It's because when you're in the public eye, you have to develop that like thick skin because everyone's commenting on everything about you and everyone has hugely polarized opinions and all of that sort of thing. So you really just have to learn to not give a shit.
Yeah.
But I think then they get in their own little bubble of people who believe the same things as them, and they stop learning to be open-minded, or maybe they don't because of course like famous people do get scared of just normal people a lot of the time, so then there's this bubble of famous people and they don't get enough new perspectives, and then they all just slowly go insane because they're just only thinking of their own minds and only thinking of the things that they believe in or know about, and then people ask them about everything though. You know, I'll bring up the unfortunate Alice Cooper incident as a good example, that, you know, people probably don't have an opinion on everything, but everyone asks them about everything, so you have to have an opinion on everything rather than just saying, I don't know enough about this to say anything, and then you just have to double down on those opinions every time because otherwise you'll get canceled or whatever, and so it creates like insanity, I think, genuinely.
Yeah.
And it seems, at least unless you're maybe Keanu Reeves or something who just might be Jesus, I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
you know, a lot of people either seem to just disappear from the public eye, which those people seem to kind of do okay, or they go insane.
Yeah.
Like, I think Oprah and Whoopi Goldberg seemed like pretty decent back in the day, and now they're like insane old conservatives.
Yep.
And so, like, what happens? They were famous too long. That's
Yeah.
my only answer to that.
Yeah, it's kind of like an extreme version of what social media seems to do to people, that we get into these little echo chambers, and we sort of start to think whenever we hear an opposing voice that they're just trolls, and we don't have to listen to them or take them seriously, and
Yeah.
then we just stay in our own little comfort zones, and then we don't learn anything, or we learn things but only just more and more hateful things, and we keep hearing more and more extreme versions of they're doing this and they're preying on the children and all that stuff.
Gosh.
Yeah, I think it was a YouTuber called Movie Bob that I like to follow. He this was a couple of years ago before J.K. Rowling really went off the rails. I can get into that if you want, but he said that his advice to JK is, "Hey Joanne, just you can just shut up, right? Like it's perfectly you're British. It's perfectly like acceptable for you to just buy a castle somewhere and go live there for the rest of your life. You don't have to engage with the public anymore at all. You don't know about these. You don't understand these feminist things that you think you're advocating for well enough, and just let people who actually understand something about gender talk about gender. Like I get that you're worried about people's safety in like locker rooms or something like that, and the British media is just absolutely horrendous towards trans people. There's like you cannot pick up a Daily Mail without it like having something about trans people in the first 2 or 3 pages. Just and it's all hateful nonsense bullshit that they've fabricated. Like they make huge deals about like this one trans person in a fun run somewhere. Like
oh my god, let people be people and get over it.
Yep. So yeah, shout out to Joanne. Shut up. End of statement.
End of episode. That's all that needs to be said.
For the record, though, I love Harry Potter. I grew up on the Harry Potter books, and I kind of have a soft spot for the movies too, and I like my Patronus is a raven, and my house is Slytherin. But I usually don't tell people that anymore. Now I've pivoted to saying that I'm either Fluttershy or Rarity, because I don't want to endorse more Harry Potter stuff. Like me and my partner, we both love Harry Potter. Just we talk about it all the time. We think about it all the time, but we don't buy Harry Potter stuff.
That's
like
the
we
usual
don't
protest.
we don't have the new game. I would love that new game, but she made it so difficult for us to buy it because she actively said that people if people hate my quote unquote transphobia so much, then why are they buying all my merch and buying all these video games and stuff? And it's like
that's not good logic.
I'm just picturing the whole company who made that game just collectively face palming. Like, Jesus, Joanne, just shut up. Hashtag Joanne, just shut up.
Oh, truly. I could go on a good hearty nerd rant. I remember being so enraged after seeing Prisoner of Azkaban in theaters.
Yeah.
Because they changed the castle why did you change the setting? I get you have a different producer or director or whatever, but why did you change the setting? It was this, like, classic, wholesome castle, and I didn't have a problem with the new one. I had a problem that they changed it the third movie into the series. Then you changed Dumbledore, which unfortunately you had to do,
Yeah.
but you went from the perfect Dumbledore to this mean dude. Why was he so mean? He was nothing like the Dumbledore that everyone loved in the books. And then you had the dumbest looking werewolf I've ever seen. You had a hippogriff that apparently got all of the CGI because the dog didn't even look realistic, and it was a dog. And then, what was the other thing that really grinded my gears? The Dementors.
Oh.
Because they could fly, which, if they can fly, they don't need to stay in Azkaban. They can take over the world. And then they froze stuff, which I just thought was lazy direction, because they don't freeze things, they create, like, a darkness and a chill. And that doesn't mean literally, like, the windows frost up. And I thought that was, like, you could do better. Like, it was a little bit of a nitpick, but I just thought, you could have shown, like, the lights dimming or something that would have, I think, been more evocative than just, it's cold now. But, so I was really hurt by that movie on a personal level. I was injured.
I hear you. I give a little bit of leeway to understanding that it's a different medium and it's a visual medium. So any way you can show that, like, this is the scary thing that's coming and it's effective enough, then, like, the freezing, I don't mind the freezing.
The freezing was a nitpick, I will say. Like, I was, like, a teenager when that came out, so I was more inclined to be enraged by everything.
Oh, sure. I was also at that age. Around then, when, pretty much every new nerd movie that came out is just like, why did they... That wasn't perfect! That wasn't exactly how I pictured it!
It is a tragedy that fantasy is extremely lacking in quality. Like, sci-fi, there's a lot of really good sci-fi out there. But then there's fantasy. Like, think of the shows in fantasy in recent years. I haven't watched The Wheel of Time. It's probably garbage, but The Legend of the Seeker... I did that right. I watched the show first, and then I read the books. And that's how you should always do it, because then you can enjoy the show for what it is, and then you can find out why everyone hated it.
Yeah.
So, Legend of the Seeker was like, okay, it was really goody two-shoes, which, when I watched it originally, was fine. I could pass by goody two-shoes. There was one episode that just genuinely made no sense and was really awful. And the ending of the first season was nonsensical, and, like, I got why everyone was really mad. But then I read the book and I was like, okay, well, the first 2 episodes cover the first half of the book. So I get that they had to flesh it out and throw some adventures in and whatnot. Probably, if I were to rewatch it now, it would be too goody two-shoes for me, and I would just, no, life isn't this good and bad, sorry. I've gone too much into the Battlestar Galactica Game of Thrones gray space these days with things, but and then, what was the other one? There was the Shannara Chronicles, was it called? Those were, again, like, I haven't read the books because they're really, like, old school high fantasy, and that's not really my jam, never really has been. And the shows were okay, cheesy, and a little, like, wishy-washy and stuff like that, and just, why is it so hard to do fantasy right? You had, like, 6 really good seasons of Game of Thrones with, I will still say, some bad moments in it, and then, of course, a nosedive, but there was good stuff.
I'd say maybe 4 or 5.
I mean, yeah. I think my biggest grievance in the first few seasons was just Dany's wedding night. And I don't know if you remember how it went in the book, but I'm forever injured by this, because the wedding night was exactly what got her interested in having, like, a deeper relationship with Khal Drogo, and when you take that away and just essentially have her raped on her wedding night, why would she put in the effort after that? It just completely made her character make no sense.
Yep.
That one hurt me deeply. Everything else in the first season, though, I don't recall having an issue with. So, but fantasy is just cursed somehow.
Yeah.
It just why don't we get good fantasy? I've had to learn to love sci-fi. I'm a Trekkie now because Star Trek, let's say, is very unbalanced in quality. But it's entertaining, I'll give it that much.
Yeah.
I've just Netflix did a big dump, so I've been watching a lot of Trek lately, and it's entertaining if nothing else.
There's a really funny, weird pattern with the original Star Trek movies that like the odd numbered ones are garbage and the even number ones are pretty good.
Interesting. I'm not on the movies yet, but they're on my to-do list. But I haven't actually watched too much of the original series because it's so 60s. Like, 60s TV just in itself was not quality. If you watch it in the 2020s, it's essentially, 60 years old now. So
this is, of course, excluding the absolutely fantabulous Adam West starred Batman series.
Yes, extremely. That is...
Same bat time, same bat channel.
There's so many good lines from that movie. It's just like, some days you just can't get rid of a bomb. Classic. What weighs 12 ounces sits in a tree and is extremely dangerous? A sparrow with a machine gun. That's not a riddle. That's just random.
I love the thinking on, like, it's the big climax. There's a bomb that's going to go off at the UN, and they decide to run because they're still in excellent physical condition. They have to take a cab.
Magical.
Oh, yes.
How long ago did he die?
2016.
Damn. I honestly, the reason I didn't know that is because I haven't watched Family Guy in years. So.
Oh, right, yeah.
I think I watched the first 3 seasons so much, like over and over, like back when it had still been canceled, that I just got completely sick of the entire premise of it. And the 4th and 5th season, I think at least, were just complete rehashes of all the jokes from those first 3 seasons.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I can't watch this anymore. It's not interesting or unique anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
I feel like a whole lot of people like Family Guy because of the sort of edgy humor of it. But to me, it was always the absurdist humor. That it's one of the closest you could get to a sort of British comedy. That there's just randomly a mouse there, and the mouse talks, and randomly a bee just flies in and decides that he's mayor.
Spider-Man appears, saves Peter from falling off a roof. Everybody gets one, and then just disappears.
Yeah, that's very similar to like absurdist British comedy, but then a whole lot of the other stuff about the show is just horse
offensive. Just like outright offensive.
Yeah. Look, I'm just so you guys know, like, I'm not the kind of guy who's like, me, I don't like that they mentioned this thing. I can take a joke. It's just if you, like, I hate when offensive humor is also lazy.
Yeah.
Like the thing with, that South Park did with the trans athlete thing, where they just, instead, like, the clever kind of comedy, like satirical take that you could take on trans women in sports would be that, like, everybody overreacts like crazy that there's a trans person. Like, in real life, the trans people don't usually win or qualify in any sport. There are pretty strict rules to how you can actually participate. I hate sports, but I have to know this kind of stuff now. Welcome to the 2020s. And then everybody makes a huge stink if a trans person actually wins something or qualifies in something. So that would be your joke to make. But then the joke that South Park decided to make was, what if Macho Man Randy Savage decided that her name was now Heather, and she just absolutely decimates everyone in every sport. And she decided this a week ago. And that's the joke. That's the laziest fucking joke you could have possibly made.
I'm extremely out of the South Park loop these days because I think South Park was always so hit or miss for me that I think the ultimately overwhelming amount of just general poop and pee fart humor and stuff kind of just it got to be too much, and I was just like, okay, I have other things I could watch that are more suited to my taste than this. I do remember they did have some genuinely really clever episodes. No offense to Mormons by any means, but the All About Mormons episode that's how you make a joke about something.
Joseph Smith was called a prophet. Dum 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 dum. Even though nobody else ever saw it. Dum 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 dum.
I had so many Mormon friends growing up. They weren't geeks though, so they're probably not watching this. But yeah, they had some genuinely quality stuff in there, and then just the other half of it was just the most juvenile garbage. So I mean, I could even say the same about Adam Sandler though. There were nuggets of gold in his movies at times. I think one of my all-time favorite moments in any movie is just, I eat pieces of shit like you for breakfast. You eat pieces of shit for breakfast? No! The reaction of no is just the cherry on top of that scene. Unfortunately, his movies have taken a pretty hefty nosedive since the 90s, basically, but
I think his style of humor was perfectly suited for the late 90s, but then I think audiences kind of grew out of his style of humor.
Did you ever see that movie? It was called Funny People. It was more of a black comedy, and I felt almost like he was kind of making fun of himself in that movie. Of course, he didn't write it, but it was sort of like the guy who got really famous writing these juvenile, dumb, not clever comedy movies, and then I don't know. It's been 10 or more years since I saw that, but it was kind of interesting conceptually, a deep look at how terrible and salty and bitter these old famous people get, these old comedians, when what was funny to them when they got famous isn't really funny anymore.
Yeah.
And then all of just their fucked up relationships surrounding that and this and that. I am sorry, by the way, about the knocking. There's cats outside this door that aren't allowed in because we have another guest cat. So I apologize for that irritating sound that keeps coming and going.
It's partly my fault. That is, in fact, Teddy, and I gave him some belly rubs right before we started, and
best friends now.
Yeah, I guess we're best friends now.
They also just really don't like being locked out of my office. But too bad.
Yeah. I am horrible with people, but apparently pretty good with cats.
I do think geeks do often tend to like cats, so normally I'd let them parade through here and invade the space, but alas, this guest is sensitive and my cats will eat all of his food.
There is a book called All Cats Have Asperger's.
Cats actually can be autistic, I learned at some point.
Yeah.
My brother had an autistic cat. This really a little, sweet little, strange little cat. It just refused to be around people, and then one day just came and sat in my lap. I was like, whoa, don't move. He's here. And I was trapped for 3 hours until my legs fell asleep. Rest in peace, Dusty, you weirdo. Beautiful little weirdo.
Can we pivot to Star Wars?
Yes. We can always pivot to Star Wars.
I've seen this show a couple of times, and Star Wars does tend to come up sometimes. So I already know a few of your takes on Star Wars. uh, it came to my mind earlier when you were talking about um, watching the thing first and then reading the book.
Mm.
Because if you read the book and then watch the movie or something like that, then you're going to hate the movie because it fails to capture all the nuances and interesting stuff that was in the book, because you can do so much in a book. And I actually, so I grew up watching the original Star Wars movies. That was even before the special editions. We recorded them off the TV and we absolutely wore the tape out. Like the first half of Return of the Jedi, just completely unwatchable, just noise. we loved them so much. My brother and I, we loved the Star Wars movies so much. And then the Phantom Menace was about to come out, and it was just watching the trailer and looking at all the promotional pictures and stuff, and then the comic book adaptation started coming out. And for some reason, at least here in Finland, the comic book came out before the movie.
Mm.
That happens sometimes. I think it's partly a marketing thing that it gets people hyped up a little bit, and partly maybe because the movie already came out in the States 6 months ago. They don't really do that anymore nowadays, unless it's an animated movie and they have to take a little bit of time to do the voiceovers.
Yeah.
But anyway, and I read the comic book again and again and again and again and again before I saw the movie, and so my experience of it was that Jar Jar was actually cool because the design of him, like a semi-aquatic sort of weird alien that was just unlike anything I'd ever seen before. And I didn't get the Jamaica thing that everybody got from it, partly because, like, Jamaica is halfway around the world. And
well, and you can't hear his voice in the comics. So.
Exactly. And the Finnish version of the comic book adaptation, they didn't do any of the me saw, you saw, I spec stuff. So it just, his dialogue seemed pretty normal, to be honest. So, like, that scene where they're in the bungo and and they're talking about, why did you get banished anyway? And Jar Jar recounts the story that he was exiled because he was clumsy, and Obi-Wan's like, you were exiled because you were clumsy? And he says in the movie, you mightn't be saying that. And that's just, kill me now, please. But you read the comic book, it's just, you were exiled because you were clumsy? You could say that. And that's just like a cute little zinger. Like, I didn't get that whole experience from Jar Jar. And then I saw the movie, and my preconception of what I thought of Jar Jar in my head was so radically different to what was on screen that I just kind of managed to block out all of the annoying stuff. And I didn't see the moment when he stepped in poo and stuff. Like, I genuinely do not recall seeing that in the movie theater, that moment. And everybody was talking about how annoying Jar Jar is, and I just didn't see it. I just had my completely own version of Jar Jar in my head that nobody else had. And yeah, so sure, those prequel movies, they weren't great. And nowadays, I cannot bring myself to watch them because they're just so cringy, and everyone hates the first movie the most. But for
Unjustified, I think.
I think the second one is actually just, as a movie, the worst.
I would agree with you on that one. I think it's probably because of, for me at least, the moment when Anakin starts, like, complaining about the sand. And I'm just like, how did this woman fall in love with this whiny, emo little bitch? Like, he's so unlikable. Just so unlikable. How did this lovely, like, Just lovely woman fall in love with this little twerp. He's 10 years younger than her, which means he's like 20 years less mature. She must have been desperate.
Look, I love a cheesy love story as much as the next guy, and I get that like Lucas based the general structure of their romance on Dr. Zhivago, and like it's a wartime love story, and sure, age differences and stuff are kind of weird, but like wartime love is like trauma laden and weird, and you can't quite ever connect with someone who hasn't been through all the same shit as you have, and I think the production design was just fantastic, and like just the whole world of the prequels is just beautifully designed, and it's so different from the first trilogy, but it's still Star Wars. It still feels like Star Wars, and like they're not good movies by any stretch, but I have a sort of fondness for the prequels that I think a lot of people don't share, and I've noticed that people who are a bit younger than me genuinely like the prequels or even prefer them to the originals. And that I'll never quite understand, but that's their version of Star Wars, and I can live and let live. But with the third one, by the time that one came out, I was in my angsty, edgy phase, and like literally the summer prior to that coming out, I was going to the Teatterkorkea, the to like just study media analysis. I was at that level of nerdiness, and I was watching Luc Besson movies and and stuff like that, and like I was a huge cinephile by that point. And then I'm in the movie theater, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna be cool. This is gonna be cool. This is the big conclusion to the whole thing, and it's gonna be amazing. And then just I'm listening to the freaking robots going Roger, ow, ow, ow when they die. Why do they say ow when they die? It's just I hated it so much. I hated that Grievous, this cool looking character, he, his dialogue is just complete filler bullshit. Just, you must realize, General Kenobi, you are doomed. Like, what Saturday morning cartoon did all of you escape from? But, like, as much as I hated that movie, then I read the book, the novelization of it, and that gave me a whole new appreciation to the entirety of the prequels, because they had time to delve into what the actual story is. And I think there is a story behind the prequel trilogy that's actually brilliant. There are so many layers to it. There are a lot of brilliant ideas that they just couldn't stick the landing on. Maybe because George Lucas was surrounded by a bunch of yes men who didn't challenge him enough, or maybe he's more of a storyteller. Like, he's a great producer. Maybe he just needed somebody to like really hone in on the details and just. But it was his version of the story that we saw, and God bless him for it. But the version I got from the episode 3 novelization just had none of the faults of the movie and just all of the good stuff. Like, I keep evangelizing this point to everyone, where there's things like in the movie, Anakin has a huge shit fit when he's allowed to be a member of the Jedi Council at like 23. By the way, but not granted the rank of master. And he has a huge shit fit about it. and the audience is just bewildered as to why is he being such a whiny bitch. But then that's consistent with his character from previously. But the reason is because he had this precognitive dream of Padme dying in childbirth, and he, as this chosen Jedi prodigy, thought he could find a way to like prevent this vision from coming true. And Yoda was telling him to just let go of people, to don't have attachments, because if you get attached, you might feel the boo-hoos. And if you feel the boo-hoos too much, you might slip into the dark side. And this traumatized kid who used to be a fucking slave, who was then put into this very strict order of basically monks with weapons who can control people's minds, where anytime he has any emotion, everyone's like, shut up, push it down.
And they don't teach you how.
They don't. Yeah.
They just say like, no, be Vulcan.
Yep. Just no emotion. Just stop having an emotion.
Yeah. Just stop. Like it's that easy.
Yeah.
Stop.
It's they tortured your mother and killed her.
Yeah. Don't feel anything.
Don't feel anything. If you screw up, you cannot tell anyone. This is exactly what happens to kids when you verbally abuse them or physically abuse them. They don't turn out to be good kids. They turn out to be kids who are really good at hiding their mistakes from you. So this guy, and there was this basically groomer, this guy who wanted to use him for his own means, who knew all of the bad shit that's going on in his head, who was promising him, oh, by the way, I know this thing about, have you ever heard the fable of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Because this is Sith thing about immortality. Like, the Jedi don't teach that stuff. And Anakin's way of reconciling that was that he'd go into the Jedi Temple and take a look at the forbidden archives that the Masters can go look at. And so when this opportunity to join the Council came up, he's thinking, if I could just join the Council and attain the rank of Master, I could learn all these forbidden things and just kind of use them for good and like save everyone around me. Everyone focuses on the Romeo and Juliet aspect of the romance of Padme and Anakin, and that's partly because of the dialogue. But there are deeper levels to this. The whole neoliberal society of a republic that's stagnant because everybody's just sort of kind of vaguely corrupt, and anybody who's well-meaning isn't listened to, and then nothing gets done, and there's the Trade Federation is basically just like a humongous corporation with a private army that's now literally taking over planets. And nobody's doing anything about it. And at that point, like a decisive leader who's like basically saying that I'm the Theodore Roosevelt here, that I'm going to like bust all these big conglomerates and make sure that everybody can still have a republic, that it doesn't like that the money doesn't just all go there and all the influence doesn't all go to the rich and powerful. And that's what the neoliberal society does. And this was Lucas's big prediction. His prequel trilogy came out around like the George W. Bush era. So it was a little bit more about more focused on like surrendering freedoms to government overreach and like military overreach and military preemptive military action and all that horrible stuff that was happening, and which he likened to the Vietnam War, which was his point with the original Star Wars movies, that his country is now acting like this evil empire with a Death Star that can just nuke other countries from orbit. It's there are deeper levels to these movies that are arguably not good, but there's a story there.
Yeah, I've heard that actually a lot of the novels are pretty like high quality. I don't know where to find them. I should really look for some of them sometime because I don't know. I'm trying to get back into reading more, and maybe some of these stories actually genuinely deserve a browse because I have heard genuinely like pretty good things about a lot of them. I will say one thing that I think was a really really missed opportunity was that newest trilogy. God, I wanted Rey and Kylo Ren to bring forth the Grey Knights. I know they're in the literature somewhere. It was building to that the whole time. Why didn't you do it?
We are in 100% agreement here. A lot of people really started to hate on the series around The Last Jedi. And I think there's a lot of people who hate The Last Jedi for a lot of reasons surrounding the movie, but not the movie itself. And I'm not saying that you, the viewer, if you hate or dislike The Last Jedi, I love it. But if you dislike it, I'm not saying you're a bigot or you're a Nazi or you hate women. That's not my point at all. My point is that um, the Force Awakens came out and people were generally excited about the new trilogy. Like, it was a bit of a fan film. Like, they just kind of recycled a lot of stuff.
It was a New Hope, basically, with a little bit less personality.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess, well, it's kind of like poetry. They rhyme, as George Lucas says. And it was a good starting point for establishing your world. And I think J.J. Abrams is really great at his thing is that mystery box thing that he's really good at like establishing mysteries.
I think that was almost even the problem with that.
It was a lot of the problem.
Because when you center a lot of the narrative around surprises and like mysteries to be solved, you lose that rewatchability because then anything interesting in the story you will learn eventually, and then if there isn't any personality to the story, if the characters aren't like good and interesting in themselves on their own without mystery, then your narrative becomes really weak once your mystery is solved.
Yep. I think part of that was exactly the misstep of maybe emphasizing mystery a little bit too much.
Yeah.
So like everyone was getting really hyped up about who's this orange person? Who is Rey? And what's going to happen with Finn? And who's Poe? And where does he come from? And where is this story going? Who is Snoke? And they sort of in The Last Jedi, that was kind of if you've established in the first movie that there are a lot of mysteries about this, and in the second one you're sort of breaking down a couple of these, and everyone was sort of getting a little ahead of themselves maybe with their own theories, and then when it didn't quite pan out the way they thought they wanted it to, then they got kind of upset that they've missed all these opportunities.
Yeah.
And
I'm one of them.
Well, yes, of course. And then they absolutely did not stick the landing with the third movie.
No, they really didn't.
They clearly panicked with the reception of the second movie, and then they just went, JJ, can you wrap this up real quick? And you can tell that JJ made a lot of really intricate, beautiful, gorgeously arranged shots in the first movie. Like, The Force Awakens, beautifully directed movie. And then Rise of Skywalker, crazy lazy.
Mm.
Just absolutely by the bones. You absolutely just have to have the core 3 people together, and they just have to zigzag through like 11 planets. And they're in a huge rush to get everywhere and to get all the points made. And the dialogue is just pure fan service stuff. They just complete pure exposition so that it cannot possibly be like unclear to absolutely anyone, because for some reason in The Last Jedi I thought the point of the movie was quite clear, but I've noticed that most people who really talk about it a lot didn't seem to get the point of the movie at all.
I have to say, I don't remember the movie at all. That's how much of an impression it left on me.
Oh dear. To me, my first reaction to it was that the movie was generally fine, but suffered from that Hollywood blockbuster sequel problem, the sort of Pirates of the Caribbean sort of plot where you have like 4 or 5 acts and it just keeps kind of going on and on and on, and it's trying to juggle too many plots at once, and that's, I think, its biggest failing for me. But really, I loved what they did with Luke Skywalker's character. Like the it seems to be that the only viable retirement plan for Jedi is cranky hermit, and he was following in those footsteps, and in the beginning of the movie he throws away the lightsaber, and he's a cranky old man, and everybody's thinking like, what did they do to my heroic Luke Skywalker? And then in the Rise of Skywalker, when he catches his Force Ghost catches the lightsaber and stuff, people were saying like, oh, the Rise of Skywalker sort of redeemed the character and like undid the damage from the Last Jedi. And I'm like, the point of the Last Jedi was that he was wrong. Like, clearly, like, Luke's big idea was that the Force doesn't belong to the Jedi, and that was actually the lesson. But then Luke learned from the failure that he let his Jedi Order fall, and what he needed to do was let the next generation do their thing. And he came in with that big ending climax fight with Kylo, where he'd already won. He wasn't actually there. He was literally projecting. Like, Kylo was literally fighting up a sort of ghostly image of what he thinks Luke was, his uncle Luke was, and so he couldn't possibly win the fight, and that was the point of that fight. Like, the just they should have gone with the Grey Jedi thing, and I hope to Cthulhu that in the new movie that they're gonna make with Rey and her Jedi Order, that they're gonna go in that direction, because that's clearly where all of the expanded Star Wars has been going for quite a while now, and that's the ultimate lesson.
Well, and it's so relevant to real life too, is that I feel like just humanity as a species has, like, our media for so long has just been like, there's good and there's bad. Religion for so long, there's good and there's bad. And reality, like everything, is a gray area. Like, every situation is unique, even when it ties into familiar things or feels familiar. Everything is gray, everything has nuance, and that would have been such a beautiful lesson if they had just seen that, hey, my way is actually great in some ways and terrible in some ways. Your way is great in some ways and terrible some ways. What if we take the best of both worlds and work with that and explore this space in between? Like, but no, let's not do that.
Yeah. That requires too much thinking and too much critical thinking, and it doesn't just completely feed into our nostalgia. That, like, Luke has the perfect setup in himself for the Grey Jedi Order, which is that, like, the light side of the Force is the shut up and don't feel. Like, just be a pure conduit to the Force. And then the Sith draw from their passion and their emotion, and that makes them strong. And the Jedi Order failed because they were trying to live up to a standard that they couldn't possibly reach. They were corrupted by politics and their own emotions that they refused to deal with and honor. And Luke Skywalker ended that when he was the only Jedi and he refused to strike down Darth Vader. He was supposed, the Jedi all said, "Yup, you just have to strike him down. There's no good in him. Only a Sith deals in absolutes, so you gotta deal in absolutes with the Sith. And if you strike down a Sith, you may just become a Sith." And clearly, if Luke had done it, if he'd stricken his father down in anger, he would have probably become Palpatine's next pawn. And the cycle of Sith just betraying each other again and again and again would have just continued. But he said no. He loved his father, or the idea of his father anyway, but he sees the Anakin Skywalker that's behind all that machinery, all that evil, all of the bad things that he's done. That he's still there, and he doesn't want to strike him down in anger and take this violent path of destruction. And instead, he throws away the lightsaber. Throws away the lightsaber and says, "No, I am a Jedi, like my father before me." And that redeemed Darth Vader. So it's not about pushing away all emotion. It's finding balance.
Yeah, peace with your emotions.
Peace with your emotions. Exactly.
And you know what show, I don't know if you've seen it, did do that right? Avatar: The Last Airbender.
100%.
Aang absolutely has a crisis because everyone tells him, you have to kill Fire Lord Ozai. And hey, spoilers for people who haven't seen the original but are watching the new one. There will be, I'm going to talk about what happens in the end there.
Third season of the animated series. We're going to spoil the ending.
Yeah, so I'll skip ahead if you're watching this for the first time. But yeah, so he has this huge crisis in the end that, like, I have to kill this man. Everyone says I have to kill this man, and he is essentially like a Buddhist monk, basically, but with the ability to use superpowers. So, like, I loved that so much that he just finds another way. Like, through sheer force of will, he finds another way, and it turns out there is another way. There absolutely is, if you want it bad enough and you put in the time and effort to find another way. Instead of killing this man, he takes away his powers. And he's absolutely no threat to anyone without his fire power anymore, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. It was a perfect way to end that show, and I love both of those shows so much.
Oh.
Except for the first season of Korra. That one was a little...
It was a little sloppy, but then it really found its own legs.
It just kept getting better.
This is why I'm always critical of people who are like, why are you watching cartoons? Why are you reading comics? Those are for children. And then it's like...
I love it. Ignorant.
It's very ignorant. It's a lot like the people who say they don't read fantasy and stuff because they only want to read about stuff that could actually happen. But
fantasy is the original literature, man.
Yep, exactly.
Come
but
on.
I love it when you can tell a story where there's a character who has some kind of powers, and their powers sort of reflect them as a character. And Aang is a very good example of this. As a Buddhist monk sort of character. He's an airbender.
Yeah,
he's
very defensive and...
he's just kind of flowing. So, like, people try to hit him with everything, and he's just kind of whooshing around. He's in a firebender who like just burns and destroys everything in his path, and he's the opposite of what's her name, Tough,
Yeah.
of the ground type of the earthbenders who are like rock solid and just will just mend any obstacle, just turn it into iron or whatever has to happen. They will just brute force their way through it. But
discover metal bending because you're just that fucking solid. Shout out to Toph. Toph is a great
Toph is
character.
the best. Oh my god. Non-binary icon as well.
Yes.
It's if you see yourself as Toph and you're a woman, then all the power in the world to you. But a lot of non-binary people identify with Toph for obvious reasons.
I loved her until Korra was a thing, and I was a little like old maybe to like really heavily identify with stuff when Korra came out, but Korra's journey just like gets me straight in my soul because she's like the girl who thought she could punch her way through everything until she got crippled and couldn't punch her way through things anymore, and a little bit spoilers for that as well, but her journey in that last season will just make me bawl my eyes out anytime I watch it. And her antagonist in that season was just scary. Like, I still remember, again, spoilers for the last season of Legend of Korra, but when that mech comes out of the mountains, I get just like, fuck! Like, they had like every idea of how to stop this. They were so prepared, and then no, we put it on feet. Screw your railroads. This thing can go wherever it wants. And I was just like, my body went cold. I was so scared. And the most beautiful thing about that, I thought, was like they beat the shit out of each other, so you get that big like Hollywood climax that you want, and then they just punch each other into the spirit realm where they don't have power anymore. And then they just have to sit down and fucking talk it out. And that was just such a beautiful ending to me that, I love that show.
Yeah.
So good. I could also go on about that relationship with Korra and Asami too, because that's just... You don't see it coming, but then if you rewatch it, man, like, you could see it coming the whole time. So
100%.
it's just incredible. I love that, like, sort of, we're romantic rivals, and then we learn to respect each other despite that, and then we actually become really good friends, and it's just... Yeah. Anyone who thinks that she should have ended up with Mako, I will fight you. They always gotta end up with an emo grumpy guy. No! Girls can end up together. I will die on that field.
Amen, sister.
It's magical. Have you watched the new Avatar, incidentally?
Oh, I haven't.
I was really scared because I know that the original showrunners left, and they were the ones who wrote those original series, so I was like, uh-oh, this isn't going to be good. It was actually surprisingly really good. There was some, like, little nitpicks here and there, but the kid playing Aang was amazing. The guy playing Iroh is amazing. He's not maybe as weird as in the original comic, or not comic, show, but, and who is the, Sokka. He is perfect as well. The only thing that bugged me was, the actor who plays Azula. You know, there's kind of, I don't want to like stereotype, but you can have like these very like soft round-faced Asians, and then you can have like the very like cheekbony Asians, and they picked one with this very kind of soft round face, and she just looks so young that it really throws me off because it's kind of hard to take her seriously a little bit, because she really looks like she's like 12 years old and like leading armies, and just something like the actor herself is actually very good. She plays the part really well and really believably. It's just the look kind of throws me off because she's really baby faced. And Azula in, you know, the comics, she's got the cheekbones, she's got the like kind of pointed jaw and everything, and she looks mean. And I don't think this girl is capable of looking mean.
Yeah.
So it's that was one thing that threw me off a little bit, but on the whole, I was actually really surprisingly impressed with it because it is only like 8 or 10 episodes, and they abridge it in a way that works really nicely. There's not a lot of superfluous adventures here and there doing this and that. So I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it generally.
Okay.
So not the cringe fest I was expecting. No M. Night Shyamalan catastrophes here. I haven't seen that.
My experience of that is actually the very same same experience as a couple of my friends have had, which is we started watching it and quit around the time they leave the water tribe area, because it doesn't feel like these kids have any reason to go with the bald kid at all. Just there's no chemistry there. Everything is so lifeless, and it just feels like that's the point where you have to give up on it. Like it's just that's where it feels like, no, this is not going to be a movie, is it? And yeah, it's fun to watch the nostalgia critic review of that, but I will never watch the full movie ever.
Is that the Shyamalan movie?
Yeah.
I've truly just heard nothing. There's almost like a morbid curiosity to watch it just to see how bad it is, but I know like that's one of my all-time favorite series, so I don't think I want to shit on it by soiling it with that legendary travesty.
Speaking of which, have you not so much
I love
travesty,
the segue.
not so much travesty, but adaptations. Have you seen the One Piece live action?
I have not. I've heard it's not that bad, but
it feels kind of weird. Like I was watching it the first few episodes. I was watching it and wondering, why did they make these choices? Like that the action seems good and the chemistry between the characters is good. The writing is funny and it's different, but I get that it's an adaptation and you have to make it a little different. And so I was the most worried about a One Piece live action you could possibly be. I've been reading it for over 20 years now, and I am a humongous One Piece fan, and I give it my seal of approval. The thing is, like, with the character designs and some of the sets, it feels like sometimes they didn't have to give this character green hair and stuff like that. So there are some things that feel a little bit out of place and feel a little bit more cosplay-y. But then it just kind of, because the gum gum fruit powers and stuff look really weird and just fake, but they're always going to look fake because that can't happen in real life. You don't have rubber skin. What would rubber skin stretching like that would even look like in real life?
Really fake.
Probably really fake. Yeah, exactly. Like if you're ever disoriented or you look at like water too long, it starts to look fake, doesn't it? It's just this. Some things just don't look right, and so giving everyone those crazy costumes and stuff just kind of fits into the world. And so once you kind of let go and just kind of immerse yourself into this world of this version of One Piece, then it starts to get really good. Then you can actually watch it and enjoy it for what it is. And I think it's quite wonderful. I think they did a very good job with it. I never saw that coming. I've always said you can make a good movie about anything, but sometimes you have to absolutely butcher it in order to make it that way. Like
I think Guardians of the Galaxy was a good example of that. The original comics were actually really, really bad, and the movies are pretty entertaining.
Yeah, they're mostly bad. There are some runs of the Guardians of the Galaxy that I really like, but yeah, just James Gunn had such good energy, and the cast was absolutely perfect, and I love the space opera-ness of it. I love the weird catharsis of it. Especially the first one is just absolutely wonderful, and I love all these characters so much that even though the second one maybe had a little bit too much of pathos, like absolutely every scene has to end in something like taking the dramatic tension away. Every scene in the movie ends with that. There's maybe a couple too many gags in there. Like the first time I watched it, I thought like there are too many gags. Like I can't get into this. They kind of butchered it on the second one. And then the second time I watched it, I could like just kind of let go and just kind of enjoy it for what it is. And you always review the movie you get and not the movie you wanted to get. Remember that next time you watch The Last Jedi. But yeah, so then the feels of it kind of just hit me. Like I cried at the ending when a character dies because of the complex feels that are there. That there are fathers and there are daddies. There are the people who raise you. And the whole thing about Guardians of the Galaxy is the found family of it. Like, you've got this kid that's been whisked off into space, and there are talking raccoons who don't know what, who have, as far as they know, never, or remember, never met a raccoon. And there are talking trees who can just say, I am Groot. And there are crazy world-ending powers and stuff like that. And there's this guy who's just listening to 80s and 70s and 80s music. Whom I cannot identify with at all. Who's just completely detached and playing Space Pirate. Like, he was raised by an abusive asshole. And not this beautiful Kurt Russell, like,
God
entity who's like the Santa Claus of fathers, who's just out there somewhere being the most awesome.
Planting his seed, like literally everywhere.
Yeah. He's the father that he thought he wanted.
Yeah.
But this crazy, complicated relationship that he has with the abusive motherfucker of a father that he has is his daddy.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I cried.
Oh yeah, no, it's a good lesson, I think, and I'm particularly like fond of found family stories.
Absolutely.
Like in my childhood, like two of my biggest loves were Anne of Green Gables and The Secret Garden, which are ultimately both found family stories. Like Anne of Green Gables is about this orphan who, I don't know if you know the story, but she gets like basically sent to this family by accident. They were looking for a boy to help on the farm, and there was just a miscommunication, and they end up with this girl, and it's like this old brother and sister, and the brother is just this like really shy, quiet guy who just, and she doesn't shut up. And she's just got such a vivid emotion and such a joie de vivre that he just immediately falls completely in love with her. And he's just like, I don't want to get rid of her. I love her. And then the sister is the more like stern, strict, like she's not the most like warm or loving mother in the world, but she's like dedicated to like raising her right and like curbing her like wildest inside like impulses and that sort of thing. And it just ends up being this absolutely most like beautiful family. And spoilers to the end of that, like in the end, gosh, I just watched this like last weekend, the 1985 made-for-TV remake of this, which is the best remake of anything that has ever been made, by the way. But the brother dies at the end, and like her father essentially, and you know, he just like has a heart attack in the field, and she's there with him, and he just says like, gosh, like the moment you showed up, like I didn't want anyone else in the world. Like you were just my little girl from that moment on. And it's just so devastating because she had never thought anyone would ever love her. She was this orphan who had been passed around for like 12 years or something like that. And then just by beautiful accident, she ends up with this family and ends up being kind of the darling of the town, so to speak. And then The Secret Garden is kind of a similar sort of story that I think it's based around like colonial England. This girl had been raised in India, in like colonial India, and So her parents kind of didn't really want her, so she was extremely spoiled, extremely unreasonable, and then her parents die of, I think it was different in the movie from the book, so I don't remember what, but her parents died and she gets sent off to some uncle. And this uncle, his like the love of his life had died, and he's afraid to like get to know his own son because his son was, I don't know, probably premature because it's not stated in the movie, but it's implied kind of that the wife was in the garden and she fell off the swing and maybe like broke her neck and then gave birth early or something, and then she died, and then the son is kind of sickly, so he's been in his bed for his whole life basically, doesn't like see the sunlight, and this girl gets sent to this house where the father's away all the time and the son just wants to see his father, and he stays in bed and nobody even talks about him. She doesn't know he exists, but she hears him screaming and everyone's like, that's just the wind, and she's like, I'm not stupid. And so she finds the boy, and then she takes him out, and they rejuvenate the garden together. He learns how to walk, and the father, it turns out, didn't want to get to know his son because he was afraid his son would die and his heart would break again.
Uh-huh.
And he's still so heartbroken over the wife that he never let himself have a family. And so she has this huge panic attack at the end of the movie that, like, well, now this family's back together and I'm going to be on my own again. But then, of course, her uncle says, like, what are you talking about, you little crazy person? Like, you brought life back to this garden and to this family. Like, you are absolutely one of us. And it's... So, but those are the stories that I grew up on. So I think I've always particularly loved a found family story. And I guess Avatar is a bit like that too. Like, they're very much kind of a found family that becomes a literal family later.
There are a bunch of kids who get thrown into this weird situation.
Mm.
I think for me, one of those is definitely X-Men, where like even before I understood the equal rights and civil rights allegories there, it was clearly like a global thing where you could come from anywhere, you could be anybody, and if you're an outcast, if you have this thing where everyone just hates you for being you, you can go to this school and you can be a family there. You can find all these other people who've had the same kind of experience as you have, and that cuts deep. And if you've seen the new X-Men '97 show, it does not pull any punches. It is just like, woo. Oh, just one day I'm gonna write a whole essay on this. but geez, like there's a mutant there who in the beginning, like, he gets kidnapped for being a mutant, but he's not like an out mutant, like he doesn't display his powers or anything, and he thinks that by being one of the good ones that he's not part of the problem in some people's eyes, and that the extremists won't target him. But I'm sorry to all the Blair Whites and Caitlyn Jenners out there. You can't be one of the good ones. And the Ben Shapiros as well. Like, if a totalitarian ethno nationalist movement takes over your country and decides to eradicate all the transes, they're going to eradicate the good ones too. They're going to eradicate the good gays and the good lesbians and the good Jews and all of those. You can't be one of the good ones because they're just going to shift the goalpost. Even like if you're white by today's standards, you might not be white tomorrow, because back in the day, Polish people weren't white. Surprisingly, recently, Polish people were considered white in America and the UK. And you could be German and not white. You could be Irish, that's still British, but still not wide enough. They will find a reason to hate you.
That is the sad state of humanity.
Not to get too political, but I feel like maybe everyone, like there's an array of colors that humans come in, like an array of shades. You might even say a spectrum.
I mean, I literally change color in the summer. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Are people who hate black people going to start hating me in the summer?
Yeah, you're colored now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
How does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And yeah, so all of us just kind of deserve the basic respect that we would give absolutely anyone.
Well, and to bring that back around to geek culture, I think that's what just like a lot of geeks are looking for in life, is just like a place where they feel like they can be themselves and be amongst their fellows, so to speak. That, you know, everyone's different and everyone's the same in varying degrees of ways. You know, we're all human beings, but we're all beautiful individuals. And, you know, some of us love sports, some of us love media. Like, we should all just be able to be who we are, and, you know, as long as you're not actively affecting other people in ways they don't like, then just let people be.
Yeah.
Just let people be themselves.
Like I will give you shit for liking Five Finger Death Punch, which is not actual metal. It's what people who don't actually listen to metal think metal sounds like. I will hate on the band forever, and I will make fun of you for liking it. But I will not make fun of you as a person. I will not attack you as a person. I will not say you are not an actual metalhead if you like Five Finger Death Punch. If you call yourself a metalhead for liking Five Finger Death Punch, then I guess you're a metalhead.
I mean, if that's the only band that you like that's considered metal, so you call yourself a metalhead, I might have a problem with that. But I'm a metalhead because I like one band that plays metal.
Yeah.
I'm not very snobby, but I might get a little snobby on that one.
We used to have a term called Nightwish metalhead, Nightwish hevari here in Finland, of like people who really like Nemo and I Wish I Had an Angel and think, yeah, I'm totally into metal, and that's kind of the end of it. I'm not even saying that Nightwish isn't metal. It's clearly symphonic power metal is clearly the genre that it's going for, but in the broad landscape of the metal community, especially 20 years ago, if Nightwish was your like go-to metal band, you are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master.
What a perfect way of putting that contextually for this whole episode so far.
If you're still watching this, then you might understand that analogy.
Oh my goodness.
I have a couple of things to say about a weird niche interest of mine, which is called alchemy.
Yes, alchemy is one of those like things that I think like remains magical to me because I never started learning about it. But there was always like, you know, the old Bruce Dickinson albums, and then stories of like Aleister Crowley, and even like Full Metal Alchemist, which is of course not probably very accurate when it comes to alchemy, but still like just the idea of alchemy I think has always been fascinating, but I don't think I actually like genuinely know anything legitimate about it. So if you have something to tell me, I am all ears.
So here's the thing. I have a sort of understanding of how I see alchemy, and basically the textbook definition of alchemy would be that it's a sort of precursory science that led to us discovering modern chemistry. So it's a sort of Enlightenment era understanding of the world that doesn't quite follow the scientific method, but they made a lot of scientific discoveries. And So it's debunked science, but there is still a sort of utility to it because the way it works is basically they understood the world as a threefold system, like a three-dimensional system, but we're using very different language here. So basically there was the world of matter, which would later lead to our understanding of chemistry, which is if you mix this thing with that thing, it changes into something new. So yeah.
You burn a log, it turns to ash.
Yeah, if you heat this up, it turns into something else. It changes forms. And then there's the sort of spirit, which is sort of the conscious mind. So like everything has a sort of consciousness, and they used to think literally everything has a sort of consciousness. So the consciousness of the rock.
That's not even so far from like Buddhism or things like that.
Yeah,
you can reincarnate as anything.
Yeah, it's a sort of pantheist idea. But yeah, so like you have the consciousness of in this bear in this moment, and it might be malleable. You are experiencing bareness at this moment. So that would be a sort of philosophical worldview a psychological sort of worldview of like what's going on in your head. Why do we behave the way we do, which is psychology. Before we understood psychology, and then there's the soul, which is a fairly Christianish idea of a soul, which is somehow different from the consciousness thing, which is sort of the philosophy aspect of it. So all of these are sort of precursors to their own modern scientific fields, but back in the day they used to think that these were all sort of melded together, so that everything has a consciousness and a soul and a material form. And
this is really close to the way that like my original fantasy stories actually had like their religions, so to speak. It wasn't religions, but like that was like the actual truth of the worlds, was that you had like a physical body, a conscious mind, and then a soul that was like the spark that gave you life.
yeah that's a little bit like it. So like Full Metal Alchemist kind of takes some of these ideas of like transmutating matter into other matter and controlling it with like a conscious thought that you want this to be a staff, and it becomes a staff. And so the matter is already there, you got to put your mind into it. And then there's the philosopher's stone that they're looking for, which contains souls. So the thing that they were missing when they tried to bring their mother back was the soul. They had the idea of their mother and the physical form of their mother in their heads, and they tried to get that to work, but they couldn't. They needed the soul.
Great show, by the way. That's my all-time favorite anime.
Oh yeah, well, one of the all-time animes, definitely. And so I've been fascinated by this idea for quite a while, and it's not like I believe in this world. It's just a sort of fantasy idea, and I like to toy around with these concepts. I love fantasy, and I love mythology, and I love conspiracies, and all those things, and my band tends to like pivot to these ideas that like anytime I do a song, most likely it's about either something occult or mythological, or it's some kind of or some kind of conspiracy, or something like that. And sometimes the idea of the song just on the surface seems to just be about some kind of monster or some kind of animal or some kind of violent act or something like that. But then underneath that, there's always an allegory of something else that I really wanted to talk about. Like the we have an album coming out in August, and it's going to be called Corpus Animus. And so the name of the band is SulfuriS, and it's actually spelled something like this.
Nice
Bear,
drop.
I would like to present you with one of the original SulfuriS shirts.
I'm so excited.
Yeah,
I want to put it on right now.
yeah,
I could be wearing 2 shirts and get real sweaty real fast.
SulfuriS actually got its name from sulfur. So
you don't say.
Yeah. So sulfur represents the soul in a way in alchemy.
Interesting.
So yeah, it has a sort of twofold function that it's both the element of sulfur and it's also the soul. And so sulfuris represents the soul. The name of the band itself is already the soul, and then
wait. So corpus animus corpus would then be the body, and then animus is the other one. Yes,
the spirit.
Yes.
Yes, exactly.
I get it.
And the album is kind of twofold, so that the first half of the album sort of speaks of the material world, the things that are in the material world. The first song is called Renewal, Skull and Hati, and the Skull and Hati is a story in the Norse mythology where the where the sun and moon are two wolves that are sort of chasing each other infinitely, and I went with this Ouroboros sort of idea with it, that it's a sort of constant solve and coagula, sort of dissolve and dissolve and then come together. Notion of renewal, that it's constantly going around, and that's the point of the song. It's both Norse mythology and alchemy.
I love that.
It's the very first song on the album. If you're fortunate enough to have it by now, it comes out in August, and there's actually a party in Cafe Mascot on the 9th of August. You should definitely be there. Grab one of those albums, grab one of these shirts, come talk to me, maybe feed me a beer, maybe a whiskey, and I'll talk to you all night.
Are you using my podcast to self-promote?
Oh, no! No, I'm just mentioning this cool band thing that I've heard of. Yeah, and the second half of the album is more in line with the spirit. So there's a thing about witch hunts. There's a two-parter about hell, which the first part it's Inferno. It's in 2 parts, and the first half is about the sort of Christian idea that if you don't believe, you get sent to hell. So you have these not even bad people who are like dreaming about like rising up and taking over heaven because they were damned here into eternal damnation because they didn't buy this one story. And the second half is based on Dante Alighieri's very sort of classical morals and Catholic self-hate sort of idea, and so basically it just goes through the different layers of hell. It's basically split into the 3 main categories of it, and the subtitle of that one is The Grace of God, because in the chorus I always scream at the end that it's because of the grace of God, by the grace of God. We're all here drowning, suffering forever. Incredible. It's not the most imaginative or original idea, granted, but it's just something I had to mull over a little bit. I come from a Christian background, and I used to really, really want to buy the story, I used to like come up with all of these crazy like mental gymnastics that would still lead me to conclude that okay, maybe the Bible's all bullshit, but the message is good. And then you look at the message and it's like every now and then there's something like to treat everybody else like you would like to be treated. But that's not the most imaginative idea either, is it? Like they're not the first civilization that thought of, hey, try not to be a dick.
Yeah.
And but then most of it is be a dick. Like just commit genocide.
Be really judgmental of everyone who's not like you.
Yeah, just rape is fine. And if you get caught raping someone, then you have to buy her as a slave. Like all of these people who are saying biblical marriage is between a man and a woman. No, there's very few man and woman marriages in the Bible, actually. They're usually something like there's a man and a bunch of women that he's married. There's a man and anyone he's sexually assaulted. There's a man and all of his brothers' widows. Just there's never been one uniform form of marriage. Not even in the Bible is there such a thing.
I'm not gonna like. I have my bad history with Christianity myself, but the one thing that I don't understand about certain types of religions is just that if God is this great, omnipotent, all-powerful being, I think the greatest hubris of mankind is to think that we would understand this God's mind. Like, if we are just a creation of something that is all-powerful, like, if you have any imagination whatsoever, like, the sheer possibility of, like, existence and what this creature would be capable of is so far beyond what our minds are capable of even imagining. So to think that something with that amount of power would look down on us and be like, you should take over those guys. Like, it's so childish to me, honestly.
This tribe of people is my chosen people.
Yeah.
And they can go around and just massacre everyone else.
Even though God created everyone.
Yep.
But, yeah.
And the entire cosmos.
Make sense.
So much wasted space. Like, do you guys have any idea how big the solar system is? How big the galaxy is? How big the observable universe might even be?
I mean, if you've watched Star Trek, you would understand that the Delta Quadrant is 70,000 light years away. That would take 75 years for you to travel back in a spaceship at Warp 9. I'm watching Star Trek Voyager right now, if you can't tell. No, but be nice. Just be nice to each other. If I could just preach one thing, just be nice. Like, literally.
Yeah, the basic respect. Like, that's where I always default on. Like, I may not agree with people politically, but, like, I don't hate you because of your politics. If you're spouting a bunch of bullshit about people like me, and like, actively working towards a genocide somewhere.
Is someone doing that right now?
Someone somewhere might be. But yeah, I'm not disagreeing with your politics. If your politics is that everyone who's not like you needs to die, then you're an asshole. You're a genocidal asshole. And I don't want to talk to you because you're a genocidal asshole. If you refuse to call me by my actual name, then you're kind of being an asshole. If you're my friend and we have a silly little nickname that you call me by, then sure, that's different because you still see me as a person and you're just kind of playfully jabbing at me. I'm quite certain that if all of these people who go on and on about like people's preferred pronouns being a problem or something, then if say Tom, there's some Tom somewhere who has this position. If everyone just decided that they're gonna call him Cheryl from now on. And just exclude him from all the boys' activities. He doesn't get to. Suddenly notices that he's been ostracized by both men and women, and then everybody's just talking down to him and not taking any of his ideas seriously, and or maybe even just like taking his ideas and making them sound like his own ideas, and making him do all the chores at home and all that stuff. Like, that guy would get pissed off real fucking quick.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah. It's like that for a whole lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I've heard this idea of like with neo-pronouns, which are kind of silly, but if somebody goes by they, them, or bug, like somebody's pronoun is just bug, if it clearly benefits the person, if it makes bug feel like they can stand bug self and not unalive bug self when people call bug by bug, then by gun I'm gonna call bug.
I have a good example of this. When I first moved to Finland, my partner asked me to stop saying retard because his brother is disabled, and so this word he found hurtful. So I didn't get this word out of my vocabulary overnight. He didn't expect me to get the word out of my vocabulary overnight. It was a process. It probably took a year before it was completely gone, if even that. But eventually, due to my respect for him and then, of course, other people in my life as well, I don't call people retards anymore. It's very simple.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not simple, but, you can do it if you have basic respect for other people.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a lot of the problem, is that people are like, well, it's difficult, so I'm not going to do it. Hey, life's not supposed to be easy. You know that, right?
This is basically a big problem that people have, is that they take offense at thinking that we're judging people for not using the correct vernacular of today on absolutely everything. And the thing is, I am woke as fuck. I am active in queer circles, and that's why I know all this stuff. But I don't know everything. I don't know everything about everything. I might be using the wrong words for some people, and I can't be expected to know everything. But once I learn that, like, they're Inuits and not Eskimos, then I will say Inuit, because I didn't know Eskimo was offensive to say. But now that I know better, I try not to say it. And you're not a bad person if you're still kind of saying, like, gay in a negative way or something like that. If it's just like you're used to saying it as a fun sort of way. But we sort of urge people to, like, try to walk away from that. And it took me until like 2016 to stop using gay in a pejorative. It took me that long.
The thing about language is that language is so much fun. Honestly, okay, I'm a writer, so maybe I'm a little bit biased, but there are so many fun things you could call people if you want to insult them. Like, even just idiot and moron are kind of like base level. Like, if you want to call someone a loser, call them a loser. But if I was to recommend just something to spice up your vocabulary, go look up, I don't remember what year this was, but it was when Trump visited Scotland, and he was bragging about how Scotland loves him, and there was an absolute tirade on Twitter of creative Scottish insults. You can Google this, you can still find collections of Scottish insults for Trump. Like, cockwomble is absolutely one of my favorite words. I don't know what that means. It just sounds funny. And if you're an ignorant fuck, then I might just call you a cockwomble. And, you can make words up. I make up words all the time. Just get creative. Call people a twat fabbler. Like, what the fuck does that mean? I don't know, but, you know, just have fun with language. And, you know, you're liable to, like, if you're trying to get a rise out of someone, call them something that they don't understand. Because then they're going to get real confused and they're not going to know how to react, and it's fun. I'm not going to lie. So.
Yeah. Like every now and then somebody gets the bright idea to say in a public space, just shout the F slur at me. And and it's like, you think I haven't heard that one yet? It's just, it's like funny to me that somebody takes the time to actually point that out. It's like, guilty! But, like, but if somebody just yelled out, "Oh, you absolute nugget!" I would never forget that.
Truly.
Yeah.
Like,
So there's a
you
lesson
need to be
there.
a dick. Be a creative dick, at least. Like, you know, this is why I've always said that if I ever start, like, putting really, really opinionated stuff online, I'm gonna put at the bottom a disclaimer. If you're gonna, like, troll shit on here, you better be creative, or I'm gonna troll you back 10 times harder because I am creative. And whatever you say to me, I can throw back at you so much harder because I'm creative. So. How long have we been going at this? Should we wrap this up? Is there anything else you want to throw in here, chat about?
Oh, I think that's most of it. So, yeah, if you're a nerd or geek and you might be in the greater Helsinki area around Tuska, you might want to check us out.
I'll
SulfuriS
be there.
SulfuriS is playing at 4 o'clock on Saturday, which is a pretty good time because it's not too early, and it's also just like kind of in between some of the more interesting acts, if I do say so myself. And I feel like Friday is the best day for like bands, but for me, getting to play Saturday is just an absolute honor, and it's going to be wonderful. Tuska is my absolute favorite festival of all time. I am totally geeking out about this. I've been to every Tuska that has happened since 2007.
Impressive track record.
Some of my favorite gigs ever have actually happened at Tuska. I've met a bunch of friends at Tuska. I met you at Tuska. Yes, exactly. So come in and see us, and if you missed that one, then maybe come to Mascot.
Mascot, is that a karaoke bar? I feel like I've been there once.
I think they do karaoke sometimes.
Well, yeah. Come check out Vincent, come check out SulfuriS, and come to Tuska, come to the album release show. I don't think I can be there, sadly. I think that's during Dark River Festival, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, alas. But, yeah, and thanks for watching, and hey, stay geeky.
Stay geeky.